This was a California where you could buy a new house in Orange County for $95,000, walk to school funded by local taxes, and Ronald Reagan's law and order promise made the state a conservative anchor, decades before culture wars divided the nation. In June of 1978, 65% of voters unleashed Proposition 13, slashing property taxes overnight and setting off a chain reaction. Suddenly, homeowners had relief, but school funding and city services never recovered. This was before three strikes packed prisons, before Silicon Valley remade the economy, before Hollywood became a global brand. But what did we trade away in the rush to protect the status quo, and who paid the price? To understand how California could look so different, so familiar, yet so far from today, we need to go back to the start of that transformation. This was a California where Ronald Reagan's voice echoed from campaign rallies to living rooms, promising to restore freedom to the streets. In 1966, Reagan swept into the governor's office, pledging in his own words to restore freedom to the streets. His message landed hardest in places like Orange County, San Diego, and the Central Valley, regions that would become the backbone of Republican power for decades. Here, tract homes went up beside orange groves, and new freeways stitched together suburbs that seemed to promise safety and prosperity for anyone willing to work hard and play by the rules. This was a California where the political map looked red from the coast to the farmlands. Nixon's Southern California strategy, targeting the same neighborhoods and towns, helped keep the state in the Republican column for every presidential election from 1968 through 1988. Law and order wasn't just a slogan, it was a way of life. Police budgets grew, and politicians talked tough on crime and communism. Reagan's governorship from 1967 to 1975 set the tone for what followed: fiscal conservatism, local control, and a belief that government should protect property, not redistribute it. This was a California where the rules felt stable, and the future looked bright for the middle class. The conservative baseline was clear, and the tax revolt was just around the corner. This was a California where a single ballot initiative could rewrite the rules for millions overnight. On June 6, 1978, voters passed Proposition 13 with a landslide 65%, an earthquake at the ballot box. Property taxes, once unpredictable and rising with inflation, were locked down to just 1% of a home's value as of 1975, with annual increases capped at 2%. For families in places like Orange County, where tract homes in cities like Anaheim and Tustin cost between $95,000 and $140,000, the relief was immediate and dramatic. Tax bills that had hovered near $4,000 dropped to about $1,500 almost at once. One homeowner, flipping through old bills at her kitchen table, remembered the sense of security. She said they could finally plan for the future, and there would be no more nasty surprises in the mail. Across the state, middle-class families felt a wave of relief and a sense of power. Sacramento's politicians had warned of chaos, but voters had spoken. But beneath the celebration, a new reality took hold. School funding, once largely local, now depended on Sacramento. The state's share of K through 12 budgets jumped from 36% to 65% in just 2 years. Per-pupil spending, once among the nation's highest, slid toward the middle of the pack. The gap between longtime owners and new buyers widened as neighbors in nearly identical homes paid wildly different tax bills. The promise of stability came with hidden costs, and the debate over fairness would echo for decades. This was a California where the tax revolt shaped everything that followed. This was a California where a single crime could change the law for generations. In 1994, the memory of Polly Klaas, a 12-year-old kidnapped and killed by a repeat offender, hung heavy over the ballot box. Voters responded with overwhelming force. 72% said yes to the three-strikes law, a measure that promised to keep career criminals off the streets for good. The rules were simple and strict. Anyone convicted of a third felony, even a non-violent one, faced 25 years to life. Families of victims stood on courthouse steps, holding photos and demanding action. Mark Klaas, Polly's father, became a voice for those who wanted safety above all else. But inside the walls of California's growing prison system, another story unfolded. Men and women were handed down life sentences for crimes as small as stealing videotapes or shoplifting socks. By the late 1990s, the state's prison population soared from 20,000 in 1980 to more than 170,000. California built 23 new prisons in just 2 decades, and corrections spending ballooned from 3% of the state budget to 11%. This was a California where fear and hope shaped policy, where the promise of protection brought new burdens. The impact rippled outward. Budget pressures mounted, families were divided, and the meaning of justice was argued in living rooms and on the evening news. This was a California where a union machinist could clock out at Lockheed or McDonnell Douglas, pick up a paycheck, and know it would cover more than just the basics. In the early 1980s, the aerospace industry alone put hundreds of thousands to work, 500,000 in Southern California at its peak. These were jobs that paid well, came with benefits, and felt steady enough to build a life around. A retired machinist from Palmdale might remember the hum of jet engines, the pride in building stealth bombers, and the certainty that next month's mortgage was never in doubt. This was a California where the dream of home ownership wasn't out of reach. In 1980, the median house cost about 2.5 times the median household income. In places like Anaheim or Torrance, a new tract home might list for $95,000 to $140,000, numbers that sound almost unreal today. One income, one car in the driveway, maybe a second parked on the curb. Gas hovered around $1 a gallon, and the commute was just another part of the rhythm of suburban life. This was a California where middle-class comfort felt like a birthright, not a gamble. Paychecks from defense plants paid for Little League fees, Disneyland trips, and college savings accounts. The prosperity wasn't just for the few, it stretched across neighborhoods, from aerospace suburbs to the Central Valley. Fiscal conservatism made sense when the system seemed to reward hard work and keep the future within reach. This was a California where the rest of the world watched in fascination. Hollywood turned palm trees and sun-drenched highways into a global fantasy, selling the idea that anything was possible under the California sky. Blockbusters like Top Gun, Beverly Hills Cop, and Die Hard didn't just fill theaters, they defined what cool looked and sounded like. On the Sunset Strip, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, and Van Halen blasted from car stereos and packed clubs until sunrise. MTV set up shop in Los Angeles, beaming music videos filmed on Venice Beach and in Santa Monica into living rooms from Tokyo to Toronto. This was a California where food was as much a part of the dream as film or music. Alice Waters opened Chez Panisse in Berkeley, and Wolfgang Puck spun pizzas with smoked salmon at Spago, giving birth to California cuisine, fresh, bold, and a little rebellious. Skateboards clattered down suburban driveways, surfers chased endless summer, and the Baywatch image of lifeguards running through the surf became shorthand for youth and freedom. Even Disneyland felt like a promise that tomorrow would always be brighter, a place where families from around the world lined up for a taste of the magic. California's soft power wasn't just about entertainment. It was about selling the feeling that life itself could be bigger, better, and more colorful here. This was a California where a single ballot measure could send shockwaves through the state's identity. On November 8, 1994, nearly 6 in 10 voters, 59%, approved Proposition 187. The initiative promised to bar undocumented immigrants from public schools, non-emergency health care, and other state services. Pete Wilson's face was everywhere that fall, his campaign ads warning that California couldn't afford to carry what he called the burden of illegal immigration. The message landed in living rooms from Riverside to the Central Valley, tapping into recession-era anxieties and the memory of Cold War certainty slipping away. But the vote also drew a line in the sand. Latino families, students, and community leaders packed school board meetings and marched through city streets, holding signs that read, "We are not the enemy." In Los Angeles, a young civic organizer remembered, "It felt like the state was telling us we didn't belong, but it also woke us up. We started to organize, to vote, to run for office ourselves." The courts froze Proposition 187 in 1995, blocking most of its provisions before they could take effect. Yet the backlash had already changed California's politics. Latino voter registration surged, and a generation found its voice. Meanwhile, the state was wrestling with other crises. Smog alerts still blanketed Los Angeles for over 100 days each year. The AIDS epidemic strained underfunded clinics, and tech jobs were just starting to draw new faces to Silicon Valley. This was a California where the old order was cracking, and the future was arriving faster than anyone expected. California's old rules, like Proposition 13's 1% tax cap, homes priced at $95,000, and the 3 strikes prison boom, still echo through every zip code. The past isn't just nostalgia, it is policy, prices, and who gets to belong. The debate over what California should be is still wide open. What's your California?